Hi, my name is Kees, and in this video, I'm going to react to Angelo DiLullo's awakening experience, as he describes recently on the channel of Simon Mundie. I'm a spiritual teacher and coach, and if you're interested in working with me, then I have the opportunity for you to book a free coaching call or donate to the channel, whatever you like. And there's also the possibility to do group works. In that case, schedule a free coaching call and then we can work together. Thanks so much for watching this and subscribe if you haven't. Here we go.
That's non-dual realization. So,
yeah, I think this is part of a longer podcast where you just described non-dual realization, which is the experience of oneness, one soup, in which there's no identification with the person anymore. There's just identification with this oneness or beingness.
so I can talk about it from my own experience, if that's
Please.
So what happened for me? It happened very quickly for me. It does happen for some people, but it's not super common. Where you'll have like these shifts in a row, and this did.
Yeah, this happened for Adyashanti, for example, and it happened for more people, but in general, it happened with more time in between.
It happened for me though. The night that I had that opening I described, the profound peace, and it did feel like everything was made out of it. Everything's made out of consciousness. The whole world is consciousness, because every way that I had thought about the world before was through thought. So all of a sudden it was all like this ubiquitous, open, spacious consciousness.
It's like you finally really feel sensations, how they really are, for the first time, without filter.
And the thing I'd overlooked about it was that it still felt very much like an experience I was having, like a seamless, infinite experience I was having. But I was so dissolved in the experience that I didn't realize that. That's the best way I can say this, but I'm going to contrast it to what came after. The next morning, actually, I woke up, took a shower, had to go to work, but I got up early so I could meditate. And I took a shower. I don't remember what was going on. My mind was probably very quiet. I'm sure it was. And I sat down and dropped right into that blissfulness. I dropped right into that clarity, that oceanic nature of everything just being this.
That's that oneness. That's the non-duality as a state, not as a teaching.
Whatever this is, call it consciousness, call it awareness. And then I dropped right in. And then all of a sudden something else happened that I could have never expected. It's not expectable. There's no way your mind could even begin to understand what this is like. But it's like it's really like the physical form of reality itself disappeared. Physical form, like the room, like it's still this way. So the room I'm in, I'm using those terms conventionally, but my actual experience is not being in a room. My actual experience is not having a body or having a self structure that's apart from anything. It's formless.
Actually experience form and formlessness, but you feel as this formless nature while you're also experiencing this fullness.
It's truly a formless reality. And not only is it like that, it's not an experience. I realized that the experience of form was an experience. This is experienceless. You need a person experiencing form to have the form. So you have this relationship between subject and object going on all the time, and that can actually stop. And
yeah, because there's no subject anymore, right? There's no conventional personal self. There's nothing that holds on to, that there's nothing that relates to anything, that needs to relate to anything. There's just, it's actually a sort of nothingness which acts and looks as everythingness.
There's no language to even describe what that's like, because language is based on distance and time and me and you and the speaker and the receiver of language. The whole thing is based on that.
How I also just said this to my wife is because this happened to me at the beginning of this year and in January, and it felt like this emptiness is so clear, that it's just so clearly empty. And that the body feels so light because you feel it's there and not there at the same time. What is there is still the sensation of having a body, but there's a intense lightness to it because it's manifesting at every moment.
It's impossible to talk about this. I can use poetic terminology. I can try to describe what went away, but it's rather a trip. I mean,
it sounds it.
Yeah, it is. It's really not. It's not in any category. It's not good or bad. But it's so natural. It's so obvious. It's profoundly. I'll say this: it is profoundly peaceful beyond even that first shift, way beyond. When there's no shadow work to do, when there's shadow work to do, that same lack of boundaries, that same lack of form, that makes it so that there's a seamless experience of just textures appearing of sound and sensations and colors that are all interwoven and intermixed and don't exist in any time or space. That whole thing sounds so beautiful, and it is beautiful. But when shadow material comes up in that, you have no boundary anymore. You can't push it away. You can't think your way out of it. You can't justify anything. You feel it so fully that can be surprising too, how directly you feel things. But
this is interesting because if you have a lot of shadow material or a lot of pain from the past, then when it plays out, and he had a couple of really fast shifts, and then in this emptiness to experience those things fully is quite intense. But for me, I had a long process towards this, 10 years, 15 years of meditation. So when this came online, I had already done a lot of shadow work. So it wasn't that intense anymore, luckily for me. But I did wait a long time for this shift. So it depends. I like my version, of course, of this, instead of having to go through all this in this empty state. Yet, when you do that, things go a lot quicker because there's so much more clarity already.
The good news about that is that's the only way you can really process it. And more importantly, that's the way you process resistance. And then the resistance starts to settle. And then over time, especially...
Don't resist the resistance, right? And if there's resistance to the resistance, which is identification itself, when that identification drops, then all the resistance that is there, first of all, it's super clear. Second of all, next to it being super clear, it's also so much more easier to drop it, to fully be with it, to let it dissolve itself.
So if you're willing to do good shadow work, more and more, that crystal clarity, formless, non-dual nature of everything is just there all the time. And it's very peaceful. So that's the second shift that happened. There was even another one after that, but
go on. You're on a roll. This is great. I'm loving it. Please carry on.
You want the last one?
Yeah, okay. Go on.
The last one is even more subtle. And I sometimes give a disclaimer when I talk about this.
Maybe he wasn't talking about the no self shift yet. He was talking about the emptiness. So you have fullness, emptiness. I had 3 shifts like this. You have fullness, emptiness, and then no self. But often the emptiness and the no self thing are together for people who are very close together. And for me, there was a couple of months between those. But let's see. I think he's going to talk about the no self.
Because it can be unsettling to people. But all I can tell you is, I promise, for me, it was not unsettling. And for anyone I've ever seen go through this shift, and I've seen a lot of people now go through it, this big one. For some people, it's very, very unsettling for a short time. Like the most unsettling thing they've ever gone through for a really short time, like a few hours or a few days. If they really fight it, like a few weeks maybe. There's something about it that is such a massive loss of disillusionment that you're actually grieving the loss of disillusionment. It's very strange. But for me,
I definitely had that. It was definitely unsettling for me, and I think I was afraid of dissolving. I was afraid of emptiness. It was just too much for me. There was, I had really a fear response to this.
It was awesome. I just kind of chuckled.
For him, it was awesome. For me, it is awesome, and it has been awesome. But at the beginning, especially first week, it was just crazy and terrifying and crazy and peaceful and crazy and terrifying and peaceful.
Called at it. And so this is what it was. It was I feel like it was a couple weeks after this. It's been a long time, but it felt like a couple weeks later. The non-dual, the formless and boundless nature of everything was clear all the time. And then all of a sudden, something else actually left that I couldn't even have fathomed could leave. And it was the very fundamental fabric of being a self at all. The possibility to be a self in any way, in any form, a universal self, a conscious self. It just suddenly just disappeared. And like everything else, I know, like everything else.
Yeah, this makes total sense to me.
It seems like that would be bad or something, but it was just obvious. Like, oh.
It's first the identification with the personal self that you lose, then the identification with the aspect of reality that's everything, and then the aspect of nothing. You actually lose nothingness because nothing is also empty, or emptiness is also empty. So you go through those aspects of reality to realize there's only a subtle perspective, which is still there. And when that perspective goes, that's the no-self shift.
Oh, yeah. It would be like a loss. It's not a loss, though. It's just a dispelling of an illusion. But it definitely changed the quality of experience as well, in that beyond that, it was less of this infinite formlessness and more of momentary appearances that are both formless and empty, and also very bright and luminous and intimate, just appearing, going, coming and going. That's my reality. Very hard to talk about that, though. So, it's almost like reality itself starts to be staccato. It starts to fluctuate in and out. Like it doesn't, like maybe there's nothing existing at all, ever was, ever could be, not even consciousness. So I don't want to freak people out because it's actually fine when it happens, but it was a radical shift, and it was also, in some sense it was very subtle, in some sense it was very radical. But I remember very clearly thinking, like, most people don't want this, because not that it's bad.
No, exactly. That's also what I remember, is like, how could you want this, right? It's because it's like, who would want it as well? And it's not what we want, is maybe this loving oneness, or that sounds a lot more appealing than emptiness, or even no self or formlessness. That's not per se what we want. But it's the nature of experience. So it will feel lighter than carrying all those other stuff with you.
And I mean, it's not just a bad thing, but most of what people are doing in the way they identify with who they are through thoughts, they're actually trying to avoid this. Most everyone, including spiritual people. I knew it. So there was that weird.
Yeah. So what we're avoiding is the void.
Like insight about it as well. It was more like an insight of the gravity of this, of like being careful how I talk about it and so forth. And, you know, I didn't mention it to anybody ever until like 15 years later, when I started talking about this and wrote a book and stuff. Then I started mentioning it. So that was the final shift in terms of anything to do with any kind of personal identity.
Okay. How can there be potentially nothing? I mean, like nothing as you've described it, and yet we're having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to imagine, you know, people probably like what?
Yeah, so apparently there's definitely a conversation happening, right? That's how we experience it, how we feel it. But what's the texture of that? That's what he's pointing to.
You know?
You sure about that? If you look closely enough at anything, you'll find there's nothing there. And this jives with physics. This, from what I understand, I'm not a physicist. I know some about physics. I do know some about it, but I don't know the math of it. But from what I understand, the quantum field theory is the most well-supported physics theory of any kind, meaning there are still problems with the particle physics, right? There's still certain problems with like gravity particles. There's things that need to be worked out, but there's nothing contradictory in quantum field theory. Apparently, it actually looks about as accurate as anything can look as a model. And that jives with my experience. Quantum field theory essentially says the same thing. It says there's an electron field. There aren't ever particles called electrons. There's excitations in a field. And there's fields interacting with one another, and those create somehow an appearance of something.
Right. Okay.
I feel like I live in that world.
Okay.
I feel like I live in that world where I can simultaneously see absolute nothingness. I am absolute nothingness. And at the same time, it's easy and fun to play the game of being in these textures of the relative world that doesn't actually exist. It only relatively exists. It's just like it's like wearing a...
Yeah, I totally understand what he means. And that's how I would say, so you have the empty fullness the Buddha is talking about, or form and formlessness. That's how I would say that there's definitely first formlessness, but then that expresses itself as form continuously. It manifests itself continuously as form, even though it feels empty. Very interesting.
It's like wearing a costume or something. I don't know. It's hard to explain it because, again, language, this is so far beyond language. But what I will say is it feels so real.
That was a beautiful interview. Really loved that. And yes, I resonate very much with Angelo's talk about that. And it's very beautiful. If you're going through awakening and you would love some support, I offer WhatsApp support and sessions monthly every 2 weeks for people on the awakening process that need some support in this or would like to be challenged in a way. If that sounds like something that you could use, then feel free to schedule a free coaching call or contact me. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't, and ring the bell to get post notifications.